What if one of the darkest moments in America's story wasn't just something we read about in textbooks, but a flashing red warning for the world we live in today? The Great Depression wasn't only a stock market crash. It tore apart the foundation of everyday life. Families lost their homes, jobs evaporated overnight, and food became a daily struggle. It didn't just reshape the economy. It reshaped governments, fueled extremism, and left scars that lasted generations. And here's the unsettling part. Many of those same warning signs are emerging again. So, are we quietly living through the early stages of another collapse? In this episode, we break down why the Great Depression still matters, and what its lessons mean for us now. The war to end all wars ended in 1918, leaving a world battered and exhausted. But what followed was a burst of optimism. Electricity began to light up homes. By 1920, about one-third of U.S. households had it, and millions more would follow. The Roaring Twenties came alive, a decade of glamour, new freedoms, and reckless ambition. The United States, the richest nation on Earth, looked unstoppable. Investors poured money into new businesses. Cars rolled off assembly lines into middle-class driveways. Telephones and radios connected families. Movies filled theaters. Jazz clubs pulsed with music and smoke. Consumer culture was booming, and many believed the old world of scarcity had been left behind. But good times rarely last forever. Reckless speculation, mountains of credit, and arrogance at the top brought everything crashing down. And when the system fell, it dragged the world into a financial dark age. The aftermath wasn't just economic, it paved the way for extremism. In Germany, it opened the door for Adolf Hitler. In Russia, it seemed to vindicate communism. And in America, it shattered the very faith people had in their leaders. It all began on October 29, 1929, Black Tuesday. On that day alone, 16 million shares were dumped, sending Wall Street into chaos. Throughout the 1920s, ordinary Americans had rushed into the stock market, chasing dreams of quick riches. Bankers fueled the frenzy, handing out loans like candy. The formula was simple. Borrow, buy, wait, sell, cash out. But stocks were priced far beyond the true worth of the companies behind them. When fear set in, the bubble popped. Panic selling turned into a stampede. Banks tried to intervene, buying up shares to stop the bleeding, but they used their customers' deposits. When the market sank further, the banks sank with it. Savings were gone, lives destroyed. Nearly 9,000 banks failed. At the Bank of the United States in New York alone, 400,000 depositors saw their money vanish. In total, 40% of U.S. banks collapsed. Businesses failed. Unemployment skyrocketed. By 1932, 12 million Americans, 1/4 of the workforce, were out of work. In some cities, unemployment topped 50%. Families were evicted, savings erased, and children grew sick from hunger. The promise of the American dream turned to dust, and the anger boiled over. In 1932, tens of thousands of veterans who had fought in World War I marched on Washington, demanding their service bonuses. Instead of relief, they were met with truncheons, tear gas, and even tanks. The protest camps were destroyed, and America's own war heroes were left beaten and broken. Meanwhile, President Herbert Hoover stuck to his belief in laissez-faire economics. He insisted that prosperity would return on its own if the government stayed out of the way. He promoted rugged individualism, arguing that relief should come from charities and local communities, not Washington. But while Hoover preached self-reliance, breadlines stretched around city blocks. Hoovervilles, shantytowns of the homeless, spread across America. People mocked their poverty by turning out their empty pockets and calling them Hoover flags. Hoover tried programs, the Agricultural Marketing Act, the Hawley-Smoot Tariff, the Emergency Relief Act, but most backfired. Instead of saving the economy, they deepened the crisis. Faith in the system collapsed. Out of desperation, people built co-ops, shared food, and survived however they could. Churches, charities, and even mobsters like Al Capone opened soup kitchens. The Depression wasn't just about money. It was about belief, losing faith in government, in capitalism, in the future itself. And this wasn't only an American tragedy. Germany, already crushed by World War I reparations, collapsed when U.S. loans dried up. By 1932, 6 million Germans, 30% of the workforce, were unemployed. Into that chaos stepped Adolf Hitler. Just years earlier, he was dismissed as a ranting extremist. But by 1932, his promises of jobs, food, and national pride won him 37% of the vote. The Nazi Party became the largest in Germany. Western banks and corporations even traded with Hitler's regime, preferring him over the threat of communism. What followed is history's darkest warning about how economic despair can fuel extremism. Now fast forward to today. In the last 2 decades, we've seen two of the largest transfers of wealth in history: the 2008 financial crash and the COVID-19 pandemic. Each time, ordinary people lost while the wealthy came out richer. By 2023, the top 1% owned nearly half of global wealth, $214 trillion. Meanwhile, 40% of adults worldwide had less than $10,000 to their name. In the US alone, billionaires grew in number and in power, even as families struggled with rising rents, food prices, and medical bills. This isn't the Great Depression, but inequality today is more extreme than ever. During the pandemic, billionaire wealth grew by $3.9 trillion, while global workers lost $3.7 trillion in earnings. At the same time, trust in government and media has collapsed. Social polarization is tearing communities apart. According to the OECD, more than half the world says they no longer trust their leaders. The United Nations warns this could mean a systemic breakdown in social cohesion. Instead of uniting against inequality, politics has become a battlefield of culture wars. Debates over race, gender, and identity dominate headlines, while discussions about wealth, class, and economic survival often get ignored. Corporations wave the banner of progress in PR campaigns while dodging taxes, outsourcing jobs, and profiting from sweatshops. Conservatives promise to save the nation, but usually with tax cuts for the rich and scapegoating vulnerable groups. The result? Inequality grows unchecked. And history tells us what happens when ordinary people lose hope. They turn to extremes, or they stop participating entirely, or they sink into despair. Dr. Luke Kemp of Cambridge studied 400 cultures over 5,000 years. His conclusion? Societies collapse when elites drain wealth from the people while dividing them against one another. Sound familiar? The difference is, in the past, collapse sometimes gave way to renewal. But today, in a global system armed with nuclear weapons, dependent on fragile supply chains, and paralyzed by political division, collapse could mean something far worse. Maybe this isn't the end. Maybe every generation fears doom. But the warning signs are here: growing inequality, fading trust, and rising polarization. The Great Depression shows us what happens when a society ignores those warnings. And the question now is, will we?